Senator Angara, and to interpellate the President Pro Tem, Senator Ralph Recto.
We're ready, Mr. President. It would be an honor to accept questions from our brilliant Pro Temp, Senator Recto.
Thank you to the sponsor. Thank you for sponsoring this measure. Would the gentleman from Aurora yield to a few questions?
Yes, certainly. It would be an honor, as I mentioned earlier. And I note also that many of the provisions here are from the measure sponsored by the good gentleman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sponsor. Let me begin by asking the sponsor to spread in the record. How much has government spent already for this pandemic?
Figures given to me is 353.46 billion, Mr. President.
Okay, so 353 billion. How much more do you think will be needed until the end of the year, Mr. President? In our committee report, there is roughly about 240 billion. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. President.
Okay. So having said that, the 350 plus 240 will be 490 billion.
That's right. That's correct.
I mean 590 billion. Is that correct?
Roughly, yes, Mr. President.
So that would be roughly now 3% of GDP. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. President.
Okay. Now, where did we source the 350 to begin with, Mr. President?
According to the DBM, this is from fiscal year 2019 and 2020 GAA, Mr. President.
Okay. So it's under the authority given under the Bayanihan Act. And how much was sourced from 2019? About 30 billion. Is that correct?
Almost 31 billion, Mr. President, and the rest from around 322 approximately, 322 billion from 2020 and almost 31 from the 2019 GAA.
Okay. And that's where the 350 billion is, right? Now, the executive, during our committee of the whole hearings last week, the Department of Finance made a presentation. And how much did they request Congress?
Around 130 billion, Mr. President.
Roughly 130 billion. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And that 130, would you have a breakdown of that 130?
I think around 50 billion of it was for the government financial institutions.
Land Bank DBP.
Bank DBP and
20 billion for field guarantee. So that's 70.
under the DOF, it's 55, Your Honor, 50 or 55 billion, and then they have 10 billion for testing. Then they have 30 billion for cash for work, 21 billion emergency subsidy to workers, 20 billion support program for impacted sectors. That makes up the 130 approximately, President.
Okay, 130 billion. Didn't they request also in their presentation? They also have in their presentation just the DOF, other policy totaling 673 billion. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, that's the monetary policy component, I believe, Mr. President, that you're referring to.
Not really. A part of it is monetary, but there are others here. It says reallocation of 2019 savings and 2020 budget.
Yes, my attention has been called to it by the Budget Office, Your Honor. I see it now.
But there is no breakdown. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. President.
At least yung 130 may breakdown. This 673, wala. Di ba?
Wala po, wala po.
Okay. Now, in effect, the DOF is saying 350 plus the 130, then may 673 pero walang breakdown, ha? Okay. Now, how much is left in the 2019 appropriations? Meron pa bang natitira?
Wala na daw ho.
Wala na, di ba? Okay. Now, in the 2020, magkano na lang ang natitira? Roughly 400 billion, is that correct?
Around 406 billion, Mr. President.
Okay, 406 billion. Okay. Did they submit to us where they will get the 130 or even if they needed the 673? Kung ang natitira, 400 billion na lang.
Is the gentleman's question if did they submit to us a source of financing, which agencies it will be taken
Yeah.
from? I don't
Yes.
believe, Mr. President.
They never did, right?
I don't believe so, Mr. President.
Okay. And remember, their original position in the Bayanihan Act was just to extend the validity of the Bayanihan Act. Is that correct?
More or less, they gave us actually, I inquired with the DOF and the other economic managers, and the DOF gave us a number of options. One was just the simple Bayanihan extension, and another one was the Bayanihan with the details you asked about earlier, the 130 billion, Your Honor.
Okay. But the original position is just an extension.
I think they took a number. They presented a number of options, Mr. President.
Okay, my recollection is just the extension to begin with. Okay. So let's leave that aside for the moment. Now, we always hear about the deficit, Mr. President. No? They have a projected deficit for the year. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think it's 8.1%, Mr. President.
Is that deficit due to additional spending or is it due to the reduction of revenue?
I think it's more of the latter, Your Honor.
The reduction of revenue, di ba? We did not incur a deficit because we spent for the pandemic, but because there is an admission on the part of the DOF that many many businesses will close, a lot will not have money, and therefore there will be a reduction in revenue.
Correct. That's correct, Mr. President.
So they're admitting that times are really bad.
In a sense, yes.
Diba? Okay. Now, are you aware of many publications that show that we are one of the smallest fiscal packages among the region?
I've not come across, but I think if you compare, perhaps ours is on the modest side, Mr. President.
Okay. I have here, I don't know if you can see it, but just in today's papers, Nomura, the headline here, Philippine COVID-19 fiscal package among region's smallest. Okay. So on and so forth. Now, in the Senate committee report now, we already have somewhat at least of a stimulus to the tune of 236 billion. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. President, and we borrowed heavily from the gentleman from Batangas's bill.
Yes. And 236 is 15% deficit.
Thereabouts, Mr. President.
Okay. So parang payat pa rin yun, di ba?
We took into account the comments made by our economic managers about
Yes.
not wanting to be on the high side when it comes to the deficit, Mr. President. So we also listened to some of the resource persons last Friday where they said that perhaps we could go up to as high as 10%, 9 or 10%. So I think with the 240 billion, that brings us to around 9.2 or 9.3%, Mr. President.
Okay. And of course, this will work somewhat like a standby authority or parang unprogrammed appropriations, di ba?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. We discussed earlier 350 billion sourced from 2020. What was the biggest item that was cut in the 2020 budget, Mr. President? Remember, they spent 350, no? And they got 30 from 2019 and 320 billion in 2020. So what was the biggest cut in the 2020 budget?
The DPWH budget was cut or realigned by 146 billion, Mr. President.
Yeah, let's stop there first. Huh? So 150 billion from the DPWH.
146, Your Honor. Yes.
Yes, roughly 146 or 150 billion. I'm just rounding it off.
Yes.
So isn't it that construction, if we're talking about a recovery, and that's what we're trying to do under the Bayanihan 2, phase 2 of the pandemic now, not to recover from this, no? And that's why we're opening up the economy little by little. But the cheapest job to be created would be in agriculture and in construction. Would that be correct?
I would tend to agree with you, Your Honor.
Okay. At the appropriate time, would the gentleman have any reservations if we were to include, put back the 150 billion cut in the committee report, to put it back to the original level of 2020 for the DPWH? So that
Standby financing?
Yes.
With standby financing, Your Honor?
Yes, with standby financing.
I would be receptive, Your Honor. Perhaps after some consultation also. I think that takes it up to over 10%, but it's still relatively more modest than the 350 initial proposal, Your Honor.
Correct, correct. Now, let me explain this, Mr. President. Number one, what we have in the bill are merely suggestions and not mandates. Is that correct? We're giving the executive all the tools that they can use. So we're giving them a bazooka, so to speak. Bahala sila if they want to press the trigger because they will have to borrow. We all realize that. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And if they don't borrow, then there's nothing to spend anyway.
Yes, Your Honor.
So it's really up to them. We're not forcing them to borrow.
I think we're just providing the tools, Your Honor.
Correct.
The final decision, I guess, would depend on the implementers.
And how much they can borrow to begin with, right?
I think our standing is quite good. I think the Economist put out an article where we are the sixth. I forgot what they're measuring, but they were measuring the fiscal stability in a sense. No? I think we were number 6, Mr. President.
Okay. And that's why if we're going on to the recovery phase, I think it is imperative to create more jobs in the construction industry. At saka dun, hindi masyado outdoor, mas may social distancing during construction. Wouldn't that be correct? Outdoor pa, hindi naman indoor yan.
Yes, I think I would agree because in the past few years,
Yes.
we've
Less
seen reduction in our unemployment. I think mainly because of these types of jobs.
Correct. Build, build, build. Not to mention, the virus is less transmitted outdoor than indoor. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so. I believe that's correct.
Okay. Okay. Second point, and I laud the gentleman for accepting my amendment in the my bill on the 20 billion agriculture, including that of Senator Marcos, 20 billion, and that's why in the committee report there's 40 billion for agriculture, no? Which
Yes.
again would be the cheapest jobs to create. Would that be correct?
Yes, I think it's fair. You don't need much educational attainment, and there is a immediate impact, I would say.
Now, What is the second biggest item that was cut in the 2020 budget, Mr. President? I think in totality, the education sector, di ba?
We
The
have we have a
the
figure
education-
here for other executive offices, which is but that's the accumulation of several offices. So maybe that would not provide the answer. But the next is EPED with an 8 billion cut, Mr. President.
Yes, 7 billion SUC and 15 billion CHED, which
That's
is your other executive offices. Wouldn't that be correct? That's 30 billion.
Well, I'm not sure if it's CHED, but it says other executive offices, 14.9 billion, 15 billion in effect.
That is the CHED.
All
That
CHED?
is
Is it all CHED?
Yes. So education is 30 billion cut, which is the most important investment we should be making. More so in the new normal. We have to spend more on fixing our schools, providing Wi-Fi connectivity, so on and so forth. Wouldn't that be correct?
That's correct, Mr. President.
And at the appropriate time, would the gentleman have any reservations for putting back the 30 billion for the education sector, but maybe repurposing it for the new normal?
Given the other proposed amendment, the higher we go, the higher also the hesitation to accept, Your Honor. But in principle, if we could refashion some of this representation is open to that specific amendment, as long as we could kind of work within agreed limits, Mr. President.
No problem with me, we will get to that later on, Mr. President. And then one last item. You will recall in my bill, I spoke about 350, and now we're down to roughly 187. The last item is 7 billion. There was a cut for the 2020 budget for DICT of 7 billion. Is that correct?
6.2 billion.
Yeah, just rounding it off. So mga 6 billion. Don't you think we can use that now for accelerating Wi-Fi connectivity in the new normal?
I think that's probably one of the more important investments we can make, Mr. President.
Okay, so at the appropriate time, I will make the suggestion. And would you have any reservations for returning the 7 billion that would be badly needed for connectivity, Mr. President?
I would be inclined to accept that, and my record of accepting the gentleman's amendments would bear me out, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. So the total, the executive requested 130 billion. Were all those requests by the executive incorporated in the committee report?
I believe so, Mr. President. Maybe not the exact same amounts, but the items, yes, Mr. President.
Okay, let me give an example, Mr. President. The executive requested roughly 70 billion. I'll put it in the heading loans for Land Bank, DBP, and Field Guarantee. Land Bank is 30 billion. DBP is 20 for Field Guarantee. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And how much did we provide in the committee report?
Well, actually, I stand corrected, Mr. President, because the submission of DOF to me was for 50 billion, not 70, Your Honor.
Is that so? So
Yes,
they reduced the request.
Yes, Your Honor. And we accommodated that in the committee report, Your Honor.
Okay. So sila mismo binawasan nila yung request nila.
I'm not sure if the 70 was the original. I'm not sure which one came first, Mr. President, but yun ang binigay po sa opisina namin, so yun ang tinanggap po namin.
Because from what I know, based on their presentation and submission to me, and their presentation during the committee of the whole, they requested for 70. And then they also requested emergency subsidy of 30 billion. Is that correct?
I think there's an emergency subsidy to workers of 21 billion and a cash for work program of 30 billion, Mr. President.
Okay. There's a difference for me between cash for work, and I'll get to that in a bit, no? And a wage subsidy. My understanding of a wage subsidy is job protection, meaning to say, so that people don't lose their jobs. You have many micro, small, medium-scale enterprises, including large enterprises, frankly speaking, that are essential, non-essential, that have been hit by the pandemic. And to preserve jobs, you do a wage subsidy, just like many other countries. That is my understanding of a wage subsidy. Iba naman yung cash for work, Mr. President. Yun naman, in fact, it should begin with wage subsidy, job protection. Pag nawalan ng trabaho, let's give them unemployment assistance, some relief, and then let's look a job for them, cash for work.
Mr. President, the gentleman is correct that they are conceptually distinct, but what we did in the committee report is provide a lump sum of 25 billion for both in order to give the executive flexibility, since they would be in the best position to adjudge what would be the necessary assistance given the circumstances, Mr. President.
Yes, I understand. And we placed there 25 billion.
That's correct, Mr. President.
Basically, what I'm trying to drive at here, Mr. President, is maybe to separate the issues altogether between our response. The first response to the pandemic is health, because essentially this is a health problem, di ba? Maybe later, this is just a style issue, Mr. President, that maybe we can start later on some of my amendments just for style, lump everything on health issue. The next would be wage subsidy, job protection. The next would be unemployment assistance, and then of course cash for work, something like that, and then loans to businesses, and then sectoral interventions like in the committee report, which I support: agriculture, increasing productivity, sectoral intervention, transport sector intervention, tourism sector intervention, and the like. Para lang may order.
Yes, sir. We're willing to work with the gentleman.
Yes, thank you. And at the same time, I don't mind, and I'm sure the gentleman doesn't mind too, that what the executive requested, na 130, ibigay natin yung 130. If they requested 130, would that be correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
In addition to that, we all know during our committee of the whole, many other departments and agencies submitted requests. If we were to count all of that, trillion lalabas yan. So I know we cannot afford to give all of that, right?
Yes,
But
Your Honor.
having said that, and based on our conversation earlier, there is nothing here that we're mandating the executive to do, because essentially they will have to borrow this money. But we're giving them the tools and we're setting priorities. Wouldn't that be correct?
In a sense, yes, Your Honor.
We're giving them the tools, and if they're willing to borrow, this is how you should be able to spend it. And then, since the time frame here is 3 months, at the end of 3 months, September, they can come back and report to us again.
Yes, Your Honor. That's
Kaya
in fact,
3 months extension, di ba?
it's even more often under the leadership of Senator Pia. It's a weekly report, Mr. President.
Unfortunately, those weekly reports are important, and it's important that they submit weekly reports, but it is incomplete. We only found out about what they cut and where they spent it comprehensively when we got back in session. Wouldn't that be correct? Hindi naman
During the
nakalagay
committee of the whole. I think it was during the committee of the whole, Mr. President. So if the gentleman wishes to insert more specific requirements, this representation is open to that, Your Honor.
Actually, I do not intend to put specific requirements. All I'm saying is that I agree with the gentleman, 3-month extension para may report pagdating ng September, in effect.
Yes, Your Honor.
Diba? So we'll know if they did borrow, what did they spend, so on and so forth moving forward. Okay, let me move on to the bigger issue at hand, Mr. President. The first quarter growth was a contraction of 0.2%. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Would the gentleman have an estimate what possibly the second quarter GDP will look like?
Much worse, Your Honor.
Okay. And isn't it that during the presentation, one leading economic indicator was that energy is down by 30%?
Yes, Your Honor. That's usually a good indicator of industrial activity.
So if energy is down 30%, possibly second quarter GDP could be negative 30. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, this week or last week, I was surprised to see that Jollibee in the first quarter lost 2 billion.
Yeah, they're closing a number of branches, I understand, Mr. President.
Yes. Wouldn't Jollibee be a good indicator of household consumer spending?
Well, yes, I think that's the Sunday habit of many of our countrymen, Your Honor. But I also note that I think they made two
Bad
big
investment.
investments.
Yes, I understand that. And then the stock market is down by what? 30%?
Sorry, I haven't been watching, Your Honor.
Yeah, and the biggest are the banks. But by and large, 30-40%. And that is an indicator also of how bad the situation is. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And surely many people lost their money here.
Certainly, especially in the tourism, transportation, a lot of the industries which are non-operational at the moment, Your Honor.
And then you're aware that critically impacted would be the airline industry, aside from the tourism industry, aside from the retail outlets, MSMEs, di ba? Sa airline industry na lang, both will have a difficult time, PAL and Cebu Pacific. Is that correct?
I would think so. It's a worldwide phenomenon, Your Honor.
It's a worldwide phenomenon. Okay. And we know that that's going to last for years. So all of these point to a bad second quarter. Now, assuming the second quarter is negative 30 and the first is roughly flat. If the second quarter is negative 30 and the first quarter is flat, kasi negative 0.2 lang naman eh. Lagay na natin flat, zero. First half contraction could be 15%.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, let me ask you, Mr. Sponsor, for the remainder of the year, third quarter and fourth quarter, will you be spending the same as 2019, your consumption pattern?
I doubt that, Mr. President. I think there will be altered consumption pattern.
Will you be spending 10% less than in 2019?
Might be more, Your Honor. I don't really know, but might be more.
Might be more. So, what, 20% less? So,
Possibly,
so
possibly.
yes, please go ahead.
It's possible, Your Honor, because a lot of people are going to be losing jobs and
Correct.
businesses will not be making as much money. So
Correct.
that will influence their consumption patterns, Your Honor.
And that's why I'm asking you. All of us here will probably spend 10% less or more pa. So if consumption will be 10% less or more, third and fourth quarter, that's a negative 10 contraction, isn't it?
Yes, Your Honor.
If it were 15% less, then the second half of the year will be negative 15 as well.
Possible, Your Honor.
And what happens if the contraction is, let's say, negative 15? How many jobs will be lost? Could be 15 million.
I'm not sure if it's that big, Your Honor, because what the figure given to us by Dole, I think is 5 to 10 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, correct. 10 million. Okay? If we were to study the NEDA's pronouncements, a negative 2.5, roughly 2.5 million na mawawala ng trabaho for every point. So kung 15 ang contraction, possibly 15 million. Kung 10% ang contraction, 10 million yung mawawala ng trabaho.
I'll have to double check on that, Mr. President. I'm not so sure.
But clearly, as we see it in America and many other countries, including China, unemployment is hitting the roof. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. The claims for unemployment claims in the U.S., I think, are 20 million, if I'm not mistaken, or higher.
Not today, 30 million na. And I assume it's not only a racial divide what's happening right now in America. That's because of the lockdown and 30 million losing their jobs.
Certainly, Mr. President. That's correct.
All part of that, right? Okay.
Your Honor.
So it is not far-fetched that we could lose 10 to 15 million jobs if we do not respond quickly, Mr. President. That's the point I'm trying to make. If you lose all those jobs, wouldn't poverty incidence also increase?
Definitely, Mr. President.
Definitely. It could double, right?
Could increase dramatically, Your Honor.
Yes. Okay. So that's how serious the situation is, Mr. President. And that's why we are proposing to have a stimulus. And it is included partially. Sige, let's try it out here in the Bayanihan Act. And that's why I mentioned about the PWH and preparing for the new normal. And then we have all these interventions. Okay. Now, I've read the position papers of the NEDA, the DOF, the DBM, and apparently they're very much concerned with the deficit and the debt to GDP ratio.
Yes, Your Honor.
And today, the debt to GDP is roughly 39-40%. Okay? We could spend a little more, but make the contraction less. Or less yung tama. And the reason why it's important to protect jobs also as much as possible is so that we don't destroy the economy by just allowing companies to fold immediately. So it's like if you go to the ICU, iisipin mo pa ba muna yung credit card mo or yung credit rating mo?
Probably you shouldn't, probably.
Hindi na, di ba?
Yes,
Saka na natin pag-usapan yun, di ba?
Yes. It will recover. And as some of the resource persons told us last Friday, you put that aside for now because everybody will probably be in the same boat and will
Correct.
probably get a downgrade anyway. So what you want is to kind of be more resilient. You want to put the ability to recover quickly in place, Your Honor.
That's what we're saying essentially here. Okay, that's what we're saying
Yes, Your
essentially.
Honor.
di
Yes,
ba?
Your Honor.
Okay, just a few more questions, Mr. Sponsor. No, this transport sector intervention, 25 billion. Okay, how do we intend to spend this, Mr. Sponsor? This is 25 billion here.
There is some guidance given on page 11 of the committee report, Your Honor. I think this is section 3BB. We direct the DOTR and such other agencies or instrumentalities to extend various forms of assistance to the businesses in the transportation industry. First is a grant of emergency credit lines, given that there will be no cash flow for these businesses, for many of these businesses, given the quarantine and given the closure of borders of countries. The second is the grant of low-interest loans or long-term credit facilities. Third is to provide guarantees, credit guarantee schemes. Fourth is to provide grants for applicable regulatory fees. Then there is the allowance for...
But essentially, this could be spent, in effect, we're making loans, possibly grants to businesses. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. We're trying to help them bridge a lot of their financing problems because many of these are loan financed, Mr. President.
Okay, okay. I have no problem with that. Basta maliwanag, we're assisting certain businesses here, right? Okay. In the tourism, will it work the same way?
There is also similarly, I think it's also the grant of loans and guarantees, credit facilities, help with their marketing. Perhaps some shared expenses would be shouldered by the government, Your Honor, to promote certain destinations. There are also grants for education and training of industry stakeholders.
Okay. Ito, in essence, these two, we're trying to keep them alive.
Yes, Your Honor.
And then on the agriculture naman, we're trying to increase productivity and income for farmers.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And then, well, thank you for adopting my recommendation for the unemployment assistance, Mr. President.
Yes, Your Honor.
And
You're
we
welcome.
have that here at 50 billion. Okay. At the appropriate time, we might make a few amendments here because if 10 million were to lose their jobs and you give them 8,000 each as a form of unemployment assistance, I mean, your worst case scenario, that's roughly about 8. You could help 10 million with 80 billion. That would also spur demand. Would that be correct?
You want to increase the support programs for the impacted sectors, Your Honor?
No, the unemployment assistance to workers, yung mawawalan ng trabaho. Kasi here it's at 50, possibly we could increase this to 80. Then I'll give you the total later on, Mr. President. No? Because 10 million jobs, kung yun ang mawawalan ng trabaho, and if government provides them, let's say, 8,000 each, that's 80 billion.
Yes, Your Honor.
And incidentally, most of them here would also be the ones paying taxes, SSS, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth, and the OFWs. And isn't it that roughly we know that 400,000 OFWs will be coming home?
I think we're expecting 40 in the coming days, and I think over 30,000 have already returned, if I'm not mistaken, President.
All told, based on the submissions of Dole, we're expecting roughly 400,000. In fact, in today's paper, there's already 100,000 stranded abroad who can't go home because we can only use 600 a day. Allow them
That's the limit of the flights, Your Honor.
Diba? And the latest number is about 400,000 ang affected.
Yeah, the Dole confirms that number you've given, Your Honor.
Yes, okay. So imagine that. There will also be a reduction of remittances, and we will have to support them when they get back home. So all told, roughly what we discussed earlier is about 476 billion, okay? And that's about 2.4% of GDP.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay? So, if there is an 8% deficit and you spend 2.4% more, that's just 10.4%.
Correct, Your Honor.
And you have a better chance. Instead of the economy contracting severely by 10% or more, you have a better chance for that not to contract as much. Di ba?
Yes, Your Honor.
So I just wanted to put that on the table and to spread those issues on the record, Mr. President. I do have a few more things I wanted to clarify in the committee report itself, but maybe, and that will not take more than 10 minutes, but maybe I can just do that tomorrow. And I'm willing to submit all the proposed amendments to the chair of the committee, so as early as now, he can make the review. Would that be fine with you, Mr. Sponsor?
Yes, Your Honor.
So at this juncture, Majority Leader, I do not have any further questions. I thank the gentleman for sponsoring the committee report and for his candid responses to our questions. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Senate President Pro Tem. I always learn something whenever he asks me questions, Your Honor. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Much. Same here. Same here. Thank you.